Hello and welcome to the Naru FastCast with your hosts, Dave and Josh Masson.
Pull up a chair and listen to us discussing fasting and health-related topics.
Thank you so much for coming on today, mate. For people that maybe don't know you, I'm going to do a little brief introduction.
Yeah.
So, joined the Aviva Premiership so you're a professional rugby player.
Yeah.
Joined the Aviva Premiership in 2013, and you played for Exeter Chiefs.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, you went on to be nominated for Player of the Year award.
We've done some research.
And well, a big fan as well. And then 2017, you got Player of the Match in the win against Wasps.
In the
final. And then England Saxons call up in 2017 towards South Africa.
Yeah.
And then you went on to go and appear for England against Argentina and in the Six Nations against Ireland. And then you ended your career, which is where we kind of met each other, in 21-22 season then, wasn't it?
A year and a half ago.
And now you are a sort of dad of four, entrepreneur, avid ice bath user. So I think that's cool.
That's a very, very impressive introduction. It's very holistic.
But I mean, you've obviously always watched you on the pitch, and we, it was lovely that we kind of got an introduction to meet. And
how was that? I was actually thinking about it the other day.
Yeah, so I think my uncle was doing some work at the Chiefs, and because I think he'd spoken to you, or someone said that you had been fasting, and then we met.
Talk more about it.
And because what had you done to your wrist?
Was it then?
Yeah.
Was it? Because I'm sure we met before then, didn't we? We met before I injured my wrist. It might have been another injury. Because I injured my wrist at the end of, just before I retired.
Yeah, no, that's when we met.
What was that?
Yeah, because we went and had a coffee at Boston's. Didn't we?
I remember that Boston's coffee. I just can't remember the time of that.
Yeah, so we kind of met at the end, and what was really interesting is obviously we were just sort of getting Naru up and running, weren't we? And
I know where you guys have come from.
and you were sort of obviously you've got your business gas, and then you've got your Samson Armand business as well, and you've also got a swimming pool business. So busy man. So I appreciate your time today. So I just kind of, is there anything I've sort of missed?
No, I think you've nailed it. I think the things I do that I love is the ice bath. Only other reason is consistency, because I think you'll know running businesses, if you're not consistent, and you'll do well for a period of time, but eventually they'll come undone. So it was all about, got gas, realised I didn't really know what I needed to know or have the resources. So Samson Armand was a natural, easy one to go into, because it's leadership and culture, and there's a lot of that the more I'm in it, the more I'm learning. Sport has a massive play over. And if you bring the sport and what you're naturally inclined to do, which is, I really love that kind of stuff. It gets easy to learn it. So it gets easier when you're tired in the evening. I'm going to sit down now and just do nothing. You go, well, actually, I'm going to go and do some learning on the business. And it's not really work. And I think that's where I'm fortunate enough to be in that position where I go, everything I learned from Samson Armand, I can start to put back into gas, but making sure I keep my time precious and doing the right things at the right time.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm always sort of really interested to sort of hear a little bit about is that I've played lots and lots of sport. I've played for sort of represent my county, but there is a massive difference between the capacity and the ability and to go from a good player to sort of professional. And I think that's kind of why when we meet up, I quite like it, because you can see that in your personality come through. So when we meet up, you're always on time. Like this, you said you're going to come, you've got a meeting after this, but you'll always make time. And I think what I like is sort of when you do something, it's almost sort of like you can see that you do stuff to the best of your ability. And I can see how playing rugby as a kid, you kind of got that attitude of like where you want to be, almost sort of like your level's like here, and where you're satisfied with. But how's things going? You're like, they're like going here, but I want to be here.
There's the other side to it.
Of course,
it's like you have ambition can be something that can be, I don't know. It's like There was something, it's like the 5 poisons. I saw some stoic thing saying one of them was there was ambition. And I was like, what does that mean? And it stuck with me. I saw it like 2 years ago. It was on some silly Instagram reel.
Yeah.
The other 4 made complete sense. I can't remember what they were, but the only one that stuck with me was ambition. I was like, why would you not want to be ambitious though? Because if you're not ambitious, humans as a race don't evolve. You have to be ambitious. But I think it's when you're blindly ambitious and you're not aware of how everything around you is going, that's when that becomes. So like, I have to be very aware, like that's where I want to be, but I've had to really learn to be kind and go, I'm not there yet, is what you're saying. But it doesn't, like, if I was like, oh look, I'm not going to be ambitious, we're just going to stick here, it is what it is, you wouldn't, like, I think you miss out on so much joy in life. I have a lot of talks with my mom, and she's, you know, nearly 70, and I'll go, come on, there's more. And like, that's what I do. You live with me, I'm going to get you into a different space. And she's like, but what's wrong with me now? And I said, nothing. I said, nothing's wrong with you. I said, but what if it could be better? Like, there's joy that you feel now, which is great. I'm not going to take away from it. But what about if there's the next level that you never knew, you didn't know? And if all you have to do is try. And if you try and you go, it's not really worth it, you just go back to how you were before. You've lost nothing. But if it's the other way and you gain something, like you don't chase. I don't think you should chase happiness. I think it'll always follow. But it follows when you try and you put your best foot forward. And that's where I think that thing is like, this is where we're at, but that's where I want to be. Like I always say in terms of like vision or whatever it is you want, picture your perfect self in 5 years' time. People go, oh, you don't want to chase perfection. I say, of course you do. Because if you're chasing perfection, you recognize you're not perfect now. And just by doing that, you have that forgiveness, like, oh, okay, I just have to take one step every day and I'm going to get closer to that perfect picture. And what's going to happen 3 years' time, that 5-year picture that you originally had is going to have shifted, and it's always going to shift because your perception of perfect will always change, and it might change to being completely different. But the point is, you're never really going to get there, but you've got to keep trying, and that's when you recognize the journey and not about the destination. And I think that's the beauty of life. Is like life is going to come at you, and you've got to keep stepping forward. And people, like, we need something to work towards, and if you don't have something like that, that's when I think life can get on top of you. Is like, you know, what are you waking up for?
Yeah, and it must be quite a shift, you know, because obviously I've watched you play rugby in front of thousands of people. And you know, and quite a change, because I mean, you've got obviously a unique skill set when it comes to sport and your mindset. And I think you then come out, and since I've known you, you've sort of been able to apply that to your sort of business and the way that you run your life, which is great. But it must be quite difficult for a lot of people to kind of find their feet and find where they kind of work with things, because you know, you are quite structured. And I looked at your calendar, you do have quite a structured life when you're a professional athlete, don't you? You know, you kind of training, rest, food, you know, it's all done for you, isn't it? And it's quite an institution almost. It's almost like people from the army come out into civvy life, isn't it? You know, and then you they kind of get
dance civies,
and and then it's like, right, you're done.
That's the challenge. That I think that's exactly there is where everyone it's a stumbling block, and if you don't do the work to recognize that, I think that's where people struggle. Whereas, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, because there's a narrative of you're going to struggle when you're done, you're going to struggle when you're out. So that's why, if you think about, you are what you perceive, like you achieve what you perceive. Your thoughts create your reality. I imagine 3 years before you come out of rugby or the military, there's a massive narrative, and you know, social media is brilliant for this. Is like, oh look, it's okay to struggle. We're all struggling. You're going to struggle when you get out. Now, unless you've empowered yourself not to struggle, that's going to happen, because you're going to come out and you're going to be like, oh, this is what they're talking about. And then you start to, like, even if you're not, it starts to feed in this. And naturally, when things get hard, the big battle is to fight that mindset of like, don't sink down to that. But that's been foundationally laid into your thinking for like 3 years or 4 years, or the whole time. It's like, make sure you know what you're doing after rugby or military, because, you know, it's tough. You're going to get, and there's different ways of empowering people. And I don't like the narrative that there is currently. It's like, you are going to struggle. So people will send you like, oh, it must be really, like, people will constantly say this. They're very well meaning, and it's not against people, because that's where I learned to take control of the things I control. As I go, I must be so tough out of rugby, and I'm like, No, it's like anything in life is tough. You starting a business, it's tough. It's all relative. It's what's tough to you is tough to me. Even though you might think mine's way tougher, I can look at your life and be like, wow, that's really tough. It's your life. It's relative. And so I've done a lot of work into structuring up. And there's a whole model that I talk about in terms of how important that is. And I think there's a lot of education that's needed on the simple bits. But back to what I was saying, the podcast that I was listening to said there's a lack of institutional support. And I said, spot on.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Like you go from, and it could be, it's not just sport or civvies, it can be any job.
Yeah.
That once you leave that job, you've left behind everything that it gives you in order to perform. Now we talk about like a high performance triangle that I base everything on, and it's like structure, mindset, skill set. Everyone focuses on mindset, but your mindset can only do well if you've got structure. And so we just think structure is this, I don't want to structure my day up, life gets boring. It's like, no, that's where life gets exciting. Is you intentionally go towards your structures and you realize your mindset then has like a springboard to bounce off of. And I take people through a whole journey of like when you're low, when you're feeling unmotivated, it's not going, I need to get motivated and then I'm going to. It's like, I don't care how I feel, I'm going to just do that. So when I had to get into the ice baths, it's got nothing to do with health, even though that's a great benefit. It's got nothing to do with anything other than I'm going to get in there and it's going to springboard me whether I'm low or whether I'm high. Because sometimes if you're up here, you need to come back down. And we talk about like just being in that midpoint, that like flow. And a good example to understand that high point is like, if you're going to be a CEO, or you guys are now chatting to an investor and you've got £1 billion investment kind of coming on, but you've got 2 investors, but you jump at the first one because you're so excited because you're up here, you're going to fluff something. Or when you're talking about promotions, you're about to get promotions, or any deal, or anything that comes with a something that makes you enlightened or happier, or your emotions up here, you need to be able to bring it down. So you look at examples of like they say, our CEO is just emotionless because they get £1 billion coming into the business and they just like that. And I think you might have actually asked me that. Is like, do you think that that's a good or a bad thing that they don't have emotion towards something that big? Like, do they stop enjoying it? And I was like, no. Since what I've learned is like when you get to that point, you have to be consistent in your emotions. And like when we talk about leadership, it's like if you're consistent, people can follow. If you're inconsistent, people don't know what to follow. So whether it's personal consistency, business consistency, like family consistency, I think if everyone just focused on being consistent rather than erratic, you would see how things start to play out. The difference is you have to have perspective that it's not going to change things in a month. But in a year, it's going to make a massive difference. Better than if you didn't perform. Like, what would you rather invest in? A business that goes really well, but then could do really badly? Or would you rather invest in a business that does, it's steady profits, and then it's going to grow steadily? You know what you're going to get. You'd rather pitch into that than, a company that does really well and then crashes completely. Yeah. Like, it's just inconsistent. So... yeah.
So I know you've sort of talked about your career as a professional athlete, the ups and downs that you've had during your career.
Yeah.
Is that where you've learned a lot of this stuff from then? Is that where you've kind of...
Yeah, I mean, interesting. So to learn the learns, because I always think I'd love to start a podcast that's just called the Failures Podcast. And I might even do that because I think like successes allows the teacher.
Yeah.
So moving house or moving country when I was 12. So how did that affect me and us and my family and how I do things today? So that's big. Like you've got your rooted childhood friends, everything that you know, everything that you're about in terms of identity. Now you shifting to a completely new one and you're having to make new friends, learn a different culture. Like that's a whole big enough shift when you go from junior school to high school. But if you move countries from junior school to high school, and that's what my shift was from like 12 to 13. And then from then you go into, university and you've got that other shift. Not that that's traumatic or any bits in there, but there's always bits in there that you have to learn from. Then I studied psychology because I think naturally I got a degree in psychology and organizational psychology. So someone said the other day, like use that as your secret power rather than something you shout about. So like I'm constantly interested in people, culture, mindset. I can't get away from it. And then rugby comes along. Studied first, then played rugby. And there were lots of great ups. Like if you Google my career, you'd be like all the stuff that you said, like their player of the match, like consistent in this, like picked, England, it's like, oh, that's great.
1,611 hours of play.
Yeah, it's a lot actually. I was actually looking at all that stuff the other day, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Looking at like, where was I consistent? Why was I consistent? What was I doing on and off the field? But then the lows, there was probably a period of a year or two where I just hated rugby and I wanted to get out. And that was playing through injury, sacrificing body for team, and then how that's all dealt with and how that comes across. And then you have to go through those battles on your own. And it's a big reliance on people that are around you. And if they don't recognize it, how does that get treated? Then you look at culture of, and how does that all play out? And then trying to get yourself out of that back onto where you were before. Mm-hmm. And then even if you are at that point, it's like there's perceived, what's the word I'm looking at, like how people perceive you. Yeah. So even if you're playing well, because they've got a cognitive bias that you're on your way down, you have to play exceptionally well. So I had to really focus on how I felt, what I did, and I would never change that low. I'd never go back and go, oh, if I could play, for England for another 3 years and not have that low, I definitely would do that, because I think I wouldn't have learned everything I learned now, and life was way more exciting now. But I think I ended the last 2 years of my career was some of the more satisfying ones, just because of the things I got to learn. I'm getting injury for the last 6 months or 4 months, it was basically from mid to end of January till I retired, was the best blessing I could have ever had, because I got injured, so I couldn't play. I wasn't going to make it back in time to keep playing. So go through that whole rehab process, really work really hard for a couple of weeks. So I just got to sit and reflect, chat, connect to the boys. Like, it was great. Like, I made the best of that situation. Where someone else could turn around like, oh, you must have hated not being able to play for the last 3 months of it. And I was like, I can't really change it. So,
but I like that though. I think it's that sort of shift in mindset, and I think I like the failure part, because ironically, I don't think you really learn from anything unless you kind of fail.
No, you don't.
Success leaves clues, and I think it leaves clues, and I think you should use those to adopt, whether it's about being a better father, about being better at your job, but whatever you want to do. But I think the failures, I don't think you sort of truly learn resilience and see how you could work unless you've kind of gone really low. And ironically, we always compare ourselves when you start anything, you start a business or you come out of a career, you kind of look at who you aspire to be. Yeah. But what you kind of ignore is like the 15 years or 10 years of like ups and downs, trials, tribulations that have gotten to this point where they are. And it's quite interesting. You kind of just jump to that, you go, right, and you start for a month and you're kind of like, well, why am I not? Why am I not driving a Lando? Or why am I not being like this? And so go back to your injury. So we sort of met you down there, and that's how. Is that you? Because you went away and did quite a bit of research, didn't you, after when you injured? Yeah. Because you're quite like that, aren't you? You kind of like to sort of jump deep into it, and that's how I remember you talking about a bit of fasting you started.
Yeah. So there was actually not for the wrist injury. That was I had something called Gilmore's groin like 2 years before, which is like your low level core around your pubis. You have 6 layers of muscle, and they started to rip apart. So I had holes in my low level core there. So it's a severe, they were like, oh, that's just a hernia. People play through hernias. And I was like, it's definitely not a hernia. So like you had like shocks coming up your adductors, which is inside thigh, all the way up to your pubis bone. And then it would go back down. So every time you sprint, every time you run, I'd feel that. Then it started to centralize into pubis, which is like, I don't know, ladies might, because after pregnancy, there's a lot of shifting of that pubic bone and everything. That's like someone getting a little knife and just do every time you run, stabbing. So I had to try and play through that for like 7 months. But you play on the weekend, no one knows what you're going through. But if you saw me running, like, have you ever seen the movie Wrong Turn? Where they're just like, like I used to get mocked because I just couldn't run. I had like a blocked left ankle. Like it was honestly, there was that pain, and then you have to try and the pressure to perform. No one else is going, like no one really, like the biggest lesson is no one's coming to save you. No one actually cares that you're in that much pain. They just care whether you can perform or not. So you have to then pitch up to training and put your best foot forward, even though if you're looking about failures, like I couldn't, from lying my back in bed, I couldn't sit up because there were no muscles there. So I had to roll over, do a push-up, and then shift over, and then get up, and then I could crack on. Going downstairs, upstairs was sore. Getting into a car, because I didn't have the low-level cores to attach upper to lower, it was sore if I could do it without, but I'd have to just lift my leg up, put it out, and then I could shift on. And that was like basic functions as you can't do. So when you talk about like pain, this was now 7, maybe not so 7 months, like 6 months of gradually getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then just the treatment you have to try and go through, and then the misdiagnosis. Not the misdiagnosis, like people doing their best. Like I don't think there's any point in ever talking ill on anyone. And then eventually getting surgery and going to see the surgeon in Harley Street. He did a test for like 5 minutes. He's like, "Yeah, you need surgery." He's like, "Normally if you have this for a month and a half, 2 months, went up." And I was like, "Oh, I've been playing on it for like 4 months or 5 months." And it was just one of those where it was horrible. And so in the off season, so I played on that in the off season, Ray, my wife, actually, she says, "I've seen people do like 7-day fasts to heal their bodies. Why don't you look into it?" So I must have spent a good 4 weeks like listening to podcasts, like trying out different bits and just doing fasts. And that's where I think to try and heal that. Didn't do it properly. It wouldn't have healed that quickly, but that then kicked off my fasting journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I remember we spoke a little bit about that, and I know that you had the, but I didn't realise you played on it for so long.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. I think that's what sort of, I think we were talking about what it kind of takes and where, do you see what I mean? That's not a normal level of kind of blocking out and...
Yeah. But then, I mean, there's a psychological term called region beta paradox. You heard that?
No.
I mean, it was going around Instagram maybe 6 months ago, and I was like, that's it. So it's like, they say if you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. If you slowly boil. So it's like that the slow pain ends up being way worse long term than if it's short, high pain that you make a change straight away. And they use it in like abusive relationships. Like people stay in those for long term, but over the long term, it gets really bad for that person, as opposed to if they get physically abused bad enough that that person either goes to jail, there's a breakup restraining order. Even though it seems way worse, in the long term, it's ended up getting better for the person. And I feel like that was a good example of that injury. It's like, it wasn't big enough that I had to be in a brace or a cast or have 9 months where it was like, you're out, fix it. It was small enough that it was like, but you can still run, you can still play. Yeah. So you start to then go physically, your performance starts, I couldn't perform as well as I could. So physically you start to not be able to perform as well. And then mentally that starts to follow. Because it doesn't matter, you try harder, but you can't do as well. So it was just a big, interesting mix of, it doesn't matter how hard you try, and you have to just keep going out there. How do you then build up the resilience and all that kind of stuff that goes with it? So it was, like, honestly, it was, I don't look back and go like, oh, they didn't treat me well. Like, fascinating. I got insights there that I'd never would have gotten if I was looking from the outside.
Yeah.
But by the way, if you're listening and you like that region beta paradox, I've only ever heard it in the negative. It's exactly the same for the positive. And it fits in with why you should be consistent on the small things. Because if you want to run a marathon, you'll do one big push, you'll train everything, bang, done. And then you'll go back to life and you'll go back to how it was before. But if you recognize that the small little things over the long term make a much bigger impact than those short term big things, that's when you can combine them even better. But that's region beta paradox used for the good. So it's like, why do you get into the ice bath, or why do you have a cold shower ice bath every day? Why? It's not going to make a massive difference to you in the day. It's going to make a difference for maybe the first hour and a half, but I promise you over a year, it puts you into a completely different mental space.
See, that I didn't know that was the relationship, but that's something that I'm always really big on.
Yeah.
Is that we talk about there's no golden bullet, there's lots of golden BBs.
Yeah, I like that.
But it is. The thing is though, like when people talk about it, it's not sexy to do things that like. I like a morning routine because I think it's consistency, like a bit like you said. Yeah. So I like to get up. I always get up and have fasted. Electrolytes, do a workout, connection with the family, see the boys. Try and get outside, a bit of grounding, and then I kind of have a cold shower and go to work.
Yeah.
And I delay my coffee intake. That's the last thing. But it's one of those things where it's now, because I've done it so often, it's been so, at the start it feels monotonous and boring. Yeah. But now it becomes part of what you do. That behaviour is seeked every day.
Yeah.
Because I've normalised it.
Yeah.
But it's like, people that are kind of like healthy, or people that I think have got a good mindset, because they've done it so regularly, it just becomes
Not
more
a thing.
commonplace. And I think it's because they just do those things more often. It's a bit like you were saying, sort of where your focus goes is sort of where your energy goes, and I think it's where your success goes. And I think if you do things regularly, they just become habit. And once you habitualize something, it almost sort of turns off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
That's like neuroplasticity, though. Think about it. The energy, you have to initially put a lot of mental inner energy into that change until it becomes. And I suppose the best analogy I've heard was in Peak Minds. There's a lady that wrote a book called Peak Minds, and she says your mind's got a flashlight like this. When you're trying to make a change, you are literally grabbing that flashlight, and that's like internal energy is putting that flashlight on a change. Like, look there, for focused attention, look there, look there, look there. As soon as you take that hand off the flashlight, it goes back to what it's used to. And so when you want to make that change work, you've got to constantly focus on, this is where I say intent into the structures. If you recognize the power of those, it's just doing that the whole time. And then eventually that gets a lot easier and you can just take it off and the flashlight's looking there automatically. But you have to have the intent to make that change initially. And that's where you can equate to something simpler like comfort zone. Whenever you start out, you are stretching your comfort zone. So there's your comfort zone. Your torch doesn't want to go. It's like there. Let's use cold showers. Like like there, you can feel that resistance. You're constantly having to. But eventually, and it might take a year, it might take 2, it might take 6 months. I can't determine your desire. It becomes something that you're like, oh, I actually just woke up walking into the shower, woke up walking into the ice bath, and that was. Then you recognize your comfort zone stretch. That torch is doing that on its own. And that's how you can almost use these analogies to be like, okay, so maybe I can do the next thing, or is this my comfort? This is what I want to do.
I like that because I think the reframe and the lens through which you look anything through changes, doesn't it? So like you said, you kind of go in the cold shower and you go, take 3 minutes, you go, oh, I've done it.
Yeah.
But kind of if you reframe that, you go, well, I've just woken up and done something that I do not want to do.
Yeah.
And I've done that. So I think when you then go through the rest of the day, I feel for me, it gives me that resilient mindset.
Yeah.
Because I go, I don't want to wake up and do this, or I kind of know, or I kind of go, oh, maybe I want to spend more time with the boys this morning. I want to see my wife a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of like, I can do that. But if I take 1 minute, and that's all it is like 1 minute or 2 minutes or however much you've got to do it.
Yeah.
It's the act of doing. And because it's the easy is it not to do it.
Yeah.
That's the thing I find. And sometimes, but even though you do it regularly, there's still days where you kind of go, oh, I just won't bother doing it.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I find that when I'm in those days where I go, I'm too busy, or I'm not too busy to take probably collectively 14 minutes out of the morning to do a 3-minute cold shower, to do, a 10-minute workout, and probably, and then, or maybe 20 minutes, and stand outside for 5 minutes and you get a bit of sunshine. Yeah. It's not a lot out of an hour and a half I spend in the morning getting ready.
Yeah. It's not. There's so many things popping up there, but they all, I think you have to have an understanding of how they work to make it more powerful of what you're speaking about. So I always look at minimum times in, not maximum. Mm-hmm. So ice bath for me is 3 minutes minimum, because I know that sometimes I'm not going to have 10 minutes to get in.
Yeah.
My cold showers is 20 seconds, because within that is just doing the 20 breaths. I'm in for 20 seconds. If I stand for longer, great. If I don't stand for, I can't ever get out within. But if I put together 3 minutes in the cold shower, 5 minutes in, suddenly you're stacking up and you're an hour and a half into a morning routine and you've got 4 kids, something pops up and you can't do it. Bang, your mindset goes, oh, I haven't done that. Then you start to get really, and I imagine you've had this where you start to get really frustrated because I need to just finish that because that's part of my routine. But it's going, what are the bare minimum standards you can have? And also not being overly reliant on the whole morning routine, but it's what's your one key one that you'll do no matter what? So let's say you go, Naru's got talking gig in I don't know, another country, America. Now you've got your everything that you used to is now gone. So it's what's your one key thing? So that's for me is cold showers is always going to be that, because you can always have, or cold water. You can always have cold water wherever you go, whether it's just out the basin, it's a river, it's a shower, it's a bar, whatever it is. And then I don't need to take my gym equipment with me and my journals everywhere. But if I am at home, then you can start to stack all those up. And that's where you get that consistency. But if you've gotten this far into the podcast and you're listening, I think there's one thing that's really, really key for resistance and understanding that's helped me loads. And I can see where it's a barrier for other people. And it's like linear thinking versus circular thinking. So linear thinking is, I tried this, it didn't work, therefore it doesn't work. So it's like fixed mindset. It's like, we've seen people try this, then this what happens, and then it's just never going to work. Don't bother. Circular thinking is, I tried this, I succeeded, and then suddenly you find yourself back to where you used to be. Like, you would have recognized this in, like, I feel like I've done a year's worth of work on myself, but I still feel like I'm the same place. Like, I've still got these same resistances. And I go, yes, of course, because it's circular thinking. You're making a change. Is the same for when you fail, when you succeed. Is it's going to come back. But consistency is like, keep going, because eventually it's going to be a bigger loop, and you're going to come back to that old space less and less, till eventually you've probably moved that circle on to a new old space. So you want to make a change and you fail at that change, keep going, because it's going to get easier the more times you do it, and then that's how your mindset will grow. It's like, I've wanted to make this change, I haven't done it, I just can't achieve it. That's linear thinking. It's like,
right,
I want to make this change, and I wanted to wake up early. So maybe as a good example, I was consistently waking up at, say, 10 to 6 because I wanted to get out of bed before my youngest son. So I had my 10 minutes at least to start my day. It's really good. Then he started to wake up early, and then just time shift and everything. And then suddenly I was going, I'm not waking up at 10 to 6 anymore. I'm waking up when he wakes up, which is usually like 6:15, because I don't know when he's going to wake up. So erratic. Linear thinking would be like, I'm just not an early waker. No, it's just not in me, right? And you hear people saying that. Yeah. But I've got my alarm set 10 to 6 still, and he still wakes up erratically. So therefore, it sometimes puts me off, and it's still an excuse, but I still have the intention that on some days I will wake up before him. Some days I won't. But I know as long as I keep having that intention to do it, when I have a big enough desire, that'll be something that I want. And that's circular thing, is like, I'm looking ahead, I'm keeping going. I'm currently failing at it, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to keep trying every single morning, because tomorrow if I do, that's a win. If I don't, it's a fail. It's fine.
I like that. And I think it's also really important, because this is sort of where I think there's a bit of a difference here, is you, I think you do what a lot of people don't do, is you apply what you understand and what you learn. Because I don't think if you can read, 20,000 books on, all this stuff.
You probably have read 20,000 books.
I have read a lot of, but it's not until you apply it, you get context.
Yeah.
And I think that you can sort of say, a morning routine is good, and you can read the book that was written by one of the guys called The Miracle Morning.
Yeah.
And you
follow Huberman.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of go, oh, okay, so that's really important. So I need to have 10 minutes of sunlight in the morning to improve my sleep and things like that. People go, oh, that's really cool. Yeah. And then you say, someone will say, oh, I've got bad sleep. Oh, I heard that it's really good to do this, right? But it's very few people go, I now do 10 minutes of morning sunlight to improve my sleep.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It's the getting started to then contextualize. But once you start, it's never, I suppose, it's never one journey. It's never flat, isn't it? So going back to your climbing anything, because it always, the seasons change, and you might not have a small amount of time. But again, I think you're going back to the morning routine thing you said as well. It's interesting. I think it's also being able to sort of look at your like global day and your global mindset, rather than being like, my morning routine is pinned on that. So I had to take the boys to school this morning, and I just have done hardly anything this morning apart from my cold shower.
Yeah.
But I know later on I'm going to have a break, and I'm going to do a workout, and I'm going to do this and do that. And I've got the joy from working from home today. But I think it's also that resilience of just not letting it's holding on to too much.
It's trying to do the perfect picture every day.
Yeah, exactly.
So like when you look at that Miracle Morning, that's someone's presented you the perfect picture. That's like 5-year vision, right? And then and I've got a little model, and I don't really know how to get it tested, but it's something that I use so often. And it's going, when you're trying to create consistency, there's 3 different elements that you've got to do, all underpinned by desire. And the 3 is scale, influence, and focused attention. So what you're saying there is like the scale, sometimes you've either overscaled, as in how much you want to do, how little you do, that you are trying to do more than you're currently able to do, because you've got so much else going on around you. So you've got the kids waking up at different times. If you understand scale, you can scale up, scale down, and you recognize what all of these things do is they add this So like, if I know that I'm being consistent, I'm not going, I'm inconsistent. I'm going, right, what I'm doing is too much for me to currently handle, so I know when to scale it up or when to scale it down because I started too big. Or if I'm being inconsistent, what's my influence like? Is it social media? Is it the friends I'm around? Is it my family? Is those things all count as influence? They stop you from doing what you want to do. Those are outside of your control. And sometimes you can't change that, but if you're aware of it, you can choose how it affects you. And then focused attention is just that torch thing. It's just like the neuroplasticity. Like, I know that I'm going to keep doing this. Sometimes you're inconsistent because you've just forgotten about it. And therefore I've got to figure out a trigger or a habit stack to be able to do that. And you got to constantly assess those three things. So like, where I'd use that in ice baths is how many people want to go, I'm bored in ice bath, now I'm going to be daily ice bathing. But they get in for 5 minutes every day, and I'm like, your scale's wrong. Because unless you've got this massive desire to run away from something or heal yourself through some massive bits, that's not going to be sustainable. You're going to be inconsistent. So if you want to do 5 minutes, maybe once every Saturday, and you commit to that, that's fine. So like my running, I can't physically run just with the amount of time I've got 4 times a week. So I've gone, if I can run the other 3 days, great, but I will run every Saturday. That's my scale. Anything above that's your bare minimum is that. Anything above that's great. And so when you've got a morning like you've got, I would say, if someone's listening and they go, I just can't fit things in around family, it's like, well, what can you fit in? So what can you scale in that's consistent for you, that you do no matter what, as your bare minimum? But everything else is above it.
But I think that's the sort of, I think that's where I see the professionalism, because it's the reframe, isn't it? It's kind of like, I can't do, or what can you do? You know, and I think that's where it's good, because a lot of people just sit with the I can't, I don't have, there's not enough. Whereas I think and again, I think is because I sort of wake up and see your sort of ice bathing every day, but it is good, because I think that having that bare minimum. And I had it. It was my wife the other day sent me yesterday, actually last night. She said this lady's, and because I get it at work, this lady sort of said, she's feeling X, Y, and Z, and she knows whether she wants to go on like this tablet, this progesterone hormone replacement tablet, because she's heard that it makes you have more energy. Yeah. And I'm just I sat there and I was like, okay, but. Like with the stacking effect, I'm like, okay, well, how's the diet? Are you sleeping well? Are you exercising? What are the things you're doing for your mental health? What's your work environment like? What's the family environment like? Nothing's linear. Like that circular thing. Nothing happens in isolation, does it? Yeah. Everything is always influenced by so many different things, and I feel that you have your intention, you have your environment, and then you've kind of got the outcome of all that. Yeah. And I think it's so important to sort of understand that it is just about doing, but like that minimum standard, just having something really small that you just keep consistent, because then it's a really good behavior to stack on. And that's for me where I find, for me, fasting is always like a really easy thing, because it's cheap, it's free.
If you fail, you can just try again the next day.
Exactly. And if you wake up and you're hungry and you eat, then well, it won't hurt anybody. You're not hurt yourself. You're not hurt anybody.
Reflect. Why did I eat? What did I do? Okay, how can I do better? That's it.
Exactly.
I think like your example there is, I feel like I'm passionate about humans, and I think everyone is so talented, but the influence part of my consistency, but is like we're in this world that disempowers you without doing it on purpose. So a story that I heard from Jim Rohn, and he goes, "Here's your cup of coffee," and he says in his American accent, and he goes, you might have heard it.
Yeah, I love Jim Rohn.
Yeah, he says, "You've got your friend, and they put sugar in your coffee," and he says, "And what happens?" He goes, "Nothing. You got sugar." He says, "But then you got an enemy, and they put cyanide or whatever poison." He says, "Looks like sugar," and he says, "What's going to happen?" He says, "You're going to die," and he says, "But sometimes you're going to have your coffee and your enemy's going to put sugar in, and what's going to happen?" He says, "Nothing, it's sugar." And he says, "But your friend, thinking they're putting sugar in, put cyanide," and he says, "You're going to die." And he says, "What's the lesson at the end of the day?" He says, "Watch your coffee." It's like, watch your mind. What's going in is going to be poison or sugar, and it doesn't necessarily come from the source that you think. It's not always going to be your enemy. It's going to be your friend that's well-intentioned. So a good example is like, when it comes to burnout, and social media is a big one for this. They are the friend that is constantly poisoning everyone's minds, trying to put sugar in. Take care of yourself, just do this. It's going, I think you're doing too much, you're going to get burnt out. And you weren't even thinking about it at that time, but you've seen it now, and that's in your mind. It's like, as soon as you get tired, there's that chimp, the chimp paradox and all that. That chimp is looking for things, and it's storing. The chimp is clever. Like, that's why we survive. The chimp is just like hoarding. And that chimp waits. And it's like, oh, there's a seed. Yeah, and then as soon as you start to get a bit tired, it goes, there's some water on that one. And then you go, oh, maybe I am. And then all of a sudden, you start to get burnt out. It's like, well, how did that happen? Because you get, and I always use this, like single moms that have 3 kids, 2 jobs, because they have to. Like, yes, that's a really like extreme example, but they can crack on for years before they start to break down. Whereas other people break down a lot quicker with a lot less going on, and it's relative. Like everything in life is relative. Where we talk depression, whatever it is, like I will never look at someone that's gone through a lot less than someone else and go, oh, they're not as depressed, they don't have a reason. That's so disempowering. But it just is like, how do we find that perspective ourselves? And it's just like, we've got to re-empower ourselves and go, if you're low energy, medicine is not going to fix that.
Yeah.
Because there's something that's constantly underlying that you haven't picked up. So it is just start to assess little things, but take control of one thing. So so have you heard that circles like you can't control, you can influence, you can control? We always worry so much about the things that we can't control.
Yeah.
You watch news, you watch the wars going on. All of these things, if you spend a lot of time in them, they're going to freak you out. They're going to create that stress. But if you just go, okay, can I influence the war? No, I'm not really going to go and fight. I don't want to. Fine. Don't worry about it. And then all you do is you keep practicing that circle model and going, I'm thinking about it again. What can I control? Can't control it. And you just give your mind steps to just go, come back to it. And you'll eventually realize the only thing you really can control is your coffee, is your mind.
Yeah.
And if you can focus there when everything else goes awry, honestly, your resilience will blossom. And you'll be like, can't believe that this whole time the answers I needed were right there. But I was constantly going to that medicine, that this. And just going, right, I am, and I say like I'm powerful image, I am able to do these things myself. It's within my reach.
But we do that a lot though. I think we go to people for answers about ourselves.
Yeah.
When we know ourselves better than anybody else.
Yeah.
In a strange way. And I think it's important to obviously, but I think what you actually do is you verbalize something to someone else. And I think the actual...
It's you talking to you, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean? Because actually you then tend to hear what you want to hear back.
Yeah.
But it's actually the projection of what you're saying to someone else. And this guy called Alex Hormady, I don't know if you...
I'm in depth studying him at the moment.
Yeah, well, he does. He every Monday he talks at 85-year-old him.
Yeah,
and he'll talk about basically, he'll basically say what he's got in his mind, and he records it and then listens back to it. And I think there's something quite powerful about it because
cathartic. Yeah, I love that. So good. I'm gonna do that
because I do it in the car on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
Because I found that I'm the best person to sort myself out, and my wife does it. She's so brutal, but she's kind of just what I need.
Mine too.
If I did that to her, oh God, I'd be in trouble. But I'd be like, oh, I'm really stressed, and she'd be like, she's gonna have a word with yourself. And I'll be like, oh, right, that's nice.
Yeah,
and oh, that's really nice, babe. And, I spend hours with you talking. And then I come away and I'm like, yeah, oh, And then I'm like, right, okay, what's wrong? Yeah. Because, when you zoom out so far, nothing really becomes... it's quite irrelevant.
As bad as you think.
Yeah, and actually some stuff doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of hold on to, oh, I've misspelt something or I've been like this to someone, but actually it does not matter.
There's something I've been trying is like, if you want to see your global view, put your thumb in front of your face, right? This thumb represents an issue or things you're focusing on. Right, so you want to see here, and then bring that thumb closer to you and closer to you, and then eventually, you're going to go squint. But if you put into your visual 2 thumbs, and you can't see past your hands, right? So that's exactly what we do in terms of we want to see. When you can see that, you realize how small your thumb actually is in context. But what we do is you focus so close in here that you cannot see anything else out. So it's that's perspective. That's how you change the way you see things. Is just recognize that what you're looking at is going to seem so big because you're focusing on it.
And I think I do love, and I love that. And when the perspective thing came, when we started out doing social media stuff, because this is a killer, isn't it?
Yeah.
You start thinking, you always go like, how many views you get?
Yeah.
And Alex Hormozy, again, he's a bit of an oracle. He said, when you reframe it, and I think this is so powerful to reframe situations. It almost is like, I think it's like a superpower. If anyone can get any form of superpower, if you look and you say, I've got 70 views, you kind of go, 70 views. But he goes, just imagine if you had 70 people in a room listening to what you're saying, you'd be like, oh, damn, that's like pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I think any situation, if you can reframe it in a certain way, like, I've missed this, I've done this. But if you can turn around and go, right, well, what can I gain from it now? I think it's just such a powerful tool. Yeah. And I think it comes to everything. You know, if you're sort of like on a dietary thing, and you kind of go like, oh, I've just eaten a cake. You're kind of like, yeah, cool. But then you've also got like, I don't know, 12 hours left to choose how you then act and perform for the rest of the day, and that has just as much of effect as that one moment that you've done there. But actually, you can have more of an influence on your day going forward.
Yeah. No. It is that reframing thing you used to Mosey's 70 views. Like, you can reframe that in so many ways. It's 70 views more than you would have got if you got none, or 70 views than you would have got if you didn't put that out. So, like, obviously, I stream every Tuesday, and sometimes I go, there were 10 people watching, and then I go, oh, if there were 10 people in the room, if there's one person in the room, like now, there's one person. I know we're putting out to like an audience, but I'm equally as happy. Like, if there's less people, it's easier to talk to those people.
Yeah, it's so true.
And yet, then that's probably an example of ambition. Like, if you want to get 1 million people watching, and you get 500,000, you're never going to be happy, are you? Yep. So it's like that's probably what they mean by ambition. Is like, it's really good to I want to be 1 million views, but I have to really enjoy the fact that I got 10, or I have to enjoy the fact that I got 15, because that's 15 people I could have made a difference on. And you go back to that, like, is that starfish story? Have you ever heard that?
No.
The man on the beach, there's 1 million starfish, and he's picking up and throwing them back in because they've washed ashore. Someone comes on and sees this guy, and he walks in and goes, "Mate, what are you doing?" He's like, "You're never going to save all of them." So the guy looks at me, throws in, and he goes, "I'll save that one." And he just keeps going. Yeah. And it's like, you actually don't need to save 1 million different things. You only need to make a difference to one. And one then makes another, and then another, and then another. And that's consistency. Like, at the end of the day, if you just do one thing, you've made a difference to one thing. So one viewer is one viewer.
And I think when you start anything, it's starting with expectation, a mindset, and reframing are really powerful, because if you start something, you start with a lot of passion, don't you? And you start with an expectation. Yeah. Now, if
there's even a graph for this or something.
Is there?
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir, of course. But if you start something, you have to be mindful that you're going to suck. Yeah. Because no one starts anything, and because what you do is you start it. Your expectation is, I'm going to deliver it like this, and what you end up doing is delivering it like this, and then you kind of go, oh well, that really sucked because it wasn't the same as what I thought it was going to be. Then you don't bother doing it anymore. Yeah. Rather than going, well, like you said, if I don't start, then I'm never going to know how good I can be. Yeah. And if I start and I suck, well, that's an opportunity to, because if you reframe that, it's an opportunity for me to go, next time I have you on the podcast, next time you have me on your podcast, whatever we do, I'm going to be like, cool, well, I had a dog walking around today, which is a real pain. She should have been upstairs. And you kind of go, cool, well, there's so many different things I want to do again next time. And inside, you're kind of dying, going, oh my God. But then you kind of go, cool, actually, this is an opportunity. I take away something from today. Yeah. I take away, like, I had a structure of what we want to do today. That's massively changed. We talked about nothing I want to talk about today. But you kind of go, cool, this is like really good stuff. So when I know next time this happens, I kind of know, right, well, the flow of it happens like this. And you learn from it, you get better and better and better. Yeah. But it's hilarious because you go back and listen to like episode 1 of, like, say, Joe Rogan, who has like 200 million downloads a day. It's hilarious. Yeah. Like, and you kind of forget, don't you, how...
And everyone else forgets too.
Exactly.
Remember that. Everyone else forgets how you start.
Yeah, because, again, Alex Hormozy, but he had this thing about...
Alex, are you watching?
Yeah. He had this thing about the Queen, right? And he basically said, how often have you thought about the Queen since she died? And it was basically 6 months a day after she passed away. And he said that there is a woman who reigned for the longest period in history over the large number of people. She acquired more wealth than any other woman in history. And you were kind of thinking, who is this person? Then as you sort of talking, going, oh my God, it's the Queen. And he was like, now tell me how many times you thought about it since she died.
Yeah.
And he was like, now think about what you're doing. If you fail, if you suck, if something happens bad today, think about how much it does not matter.
No one cares.
No one actually cares.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because I used to sort of think, oh, is my hair done? What do I look like? But then now I'm like, I just don't care because I know no one else is going to care in the 5 minutes they walk, the 5 seconds they walk past me and see me. And like, they're just not going to care. And I shouldn't care because, like I say, it's external stimulus, isn't it?
But I mean, there's a fine balance for that, isn't there? Because we have to care. Unfortunately, you go into a world where people do care about how you look to be successful.
Yeah.
I think the higher up you go, the less you should care. But it's a fine balance, because if I walked into a potential investor meeting and I was wearing flip-flops and a raggedy shirt, I'd have to be super confident who I was, and I'd have to have a good, you think you go into an investor meeting with that shirt but it's got holes in it and everything, you're going to have to be in a really good space as a person to be able to sell yourself. Yeah. So therefore it goes back to, I suppose, in a roundabout way of answering this question, is like, who are you? What do you have to offer? And just be yourself. Because if you're yourself, people don't really care what's on the outside, do they?
Yeah.
But if we are being someone else because we care about what everyone else is thinking, no one actually cares about what's on the outside. They care about what's on the inside. And if there's nothing there, they can't connect with it. Yeah. I don't know. I think I lost the trail there, but...
No, you're right there, and I think sometimes you also have to be mindful of that people, when you are who you are, they project their own things onto you, don't they?
And it's authentic. I think people connect on an authentic level. Like that's what's missing sometimes, is authenticity. But like there was somebody put a link to the other day. It said the world celebrates outcomes, not the process.
Yeah, very true.
And that's what we forget. So when you start off, you're like, I want to have 1 million views. There's no process that you've seen there. And so it's actually, if you watch successful people, don't look at what they've got. Look at their journey and look where they failed. So you even said you don't learn much from success, but I actually think you don't succeed without failure.
Oh, it's impossible.
So that's where it is. Like, don't look at success and just be like, I need to achieve that. Look at their failures and go, I need to either go through that or just do what they did next. And then you won't fail at that stage. And it's just, that's how I think human evolution works. It's like, look at how people fail. Like, if you went and jumped off a cliff and died, I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to jump off that. But if you go and jump off and you swim, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that one. So we constantly evolution. Like, you can't, there's a book called Recapture the Rapture that I'm listening to.
Right.
And they talk at one stage about like the biology versus mental, like psychology. Mm-hmm. And biology has a much bigger underlying driver than we think. So like they talk about like the neurochemicals and all of those things that drive us. And as much as we think that it all is only in mind, it like, yes, your mind does control your biology. It can control, the chemicals that go out, but you have to have a lot of work done in there. Yeah. And until you get to that point, there's going to be biological underdrivers. And that's where it's like, if you can understand those, you can understand like fear of failure. You can understand why we want to connect, why loneliness happens, why you get sad when you're not achieving. All of those things will be fed off biological drivers. You just have to try and understand them. So I can't explain them, but I'm going to get there.
But I like that. And I kind of like that sort of triangle of how you think is how you feel is how you behave.
Yeah.
And I sort of
do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do kind of like that, because I think, it's that affirmation, powers of affirmation and stuff like that in the morning, isn't it? And there's so many things that you do, I think when you habitualize them. I listened to a podcast and the guy was saying that 90% of the thoughts that we had yesterday will be brought into the following day. So you only tend to have around about 10% of new thoughts each day, which just spells if you've got, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm rubbish, I'm fat, I'm not healthy, I can't do this, I can't do that. Then what you thought yesterday, without a dramatic change overnight, you're going to wake up and think, I feel, I'm fat, I'm healthy.
So you've got to constantly reframe, don't you?
Yeah, and then you've also just got to constantly just go, well, what can I, how can I make today better than yesterday? Yeah. And I think if you kind of lead with that in the morning, you're making those marginal gains, but over a year of doing that,
Yeah.
You'll probably find that you'll just be more resilient and more adaptable.
I think it's that, give yourself time. If you're watching this and you're struggling, like, give yourself time. Like that underlying human driver to evolve is always going to take you through. It's just give yourself a chance. Like, any change that you've tried to make, you probably and you stopped too soon. So be kind to yourself. Like, give yourself 2 years rather than 3 months.
Yeah.
Because no one actually cares if you achieve it in 3 months. They really don't. But they care if you achieve it in 2 years' time. It's going to be the same to the people. You're in the process. No one is going to be looking at you in the process as much as you want to shout about it. So it is like, if you're watching this and you've tried to make a change, or you're currently making a change, or you're frustrated with the speed of your change, understand that it's so important to just keep going. I think that's really key. And then also, what we haven't spoken about, because I'm going to take it on a different tangent now, is your branding. I love it. So I know that you originally spoke about like the different elements and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's really cool. Explain that a little bit, because I'm going to ask you from a customer point of view.
Okay. So what we wanted to do is there's so many sort of, we talked before, but there's so many different things that contribute to overall health. And what we tried to do is we're sort of developing the brand where we'll bring elements in with certain things, whether it's, for example, we would have like, if we wanted to have like earth, like for like recovery, we would want to have sort of products, and we'd also want to have certain things like a 21-day fast sort of a workout challenge, for example, where we can encourage people to say, in this part, so like, for example, like nature, sunlight, exercise, resistance, connection, all these types of things are part of how you like improve your global health. And I think there's something that people don't really talk about. I had a patient come in yesterday. She'd just been to see a doctor, and she came back with HRT. And I was like, cool, did they talk to you about like muscle mass, increasing protein? What about collagen loss? Did they talk to you about after, menopause, like some of the risk factors of that? And they're like, no. And I think part of what we do is we take everything with mental health or anything in isolation.
Yeah.
And I think what we want to do with Naru is we basically want to just take people and say, whatever door you're opening, whether you kind of go, okay, I want to go out in nature a bit more, you kind of go, that's cool. But there's also other things that you kind of need to be doing to help your global health. And some people might be doing everything, and some people might get loads of benefit from just getting more sleep.
Yeah.
And that's all they need. And they wake up in the morning, they have good mental health, they've got good connections, they've got a loving home, they've got a good job, they're happy with their life, they're driven. They're all the satisfying things, but maybe there's something missing.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel that it's a bit like casting a net out into a really wide ocean. The bigger the net. And if you sort of think, I feel good now, I like trying and adapting. And I think that's what we want to do with Naru, is to get people to go, well, you feel a bit like you were saying right at the start. It's how you can feel like this versus feeling like this.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that this is the goal to be better than where you are, but it's almost sort of, how do you know? So if you're going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're fasting, you're exercising, you're doing half Ironmans, all those types of things, it's probably something, and just, maybe you feel a bit tired during the day, you're having quite a bit more coffee. It's just, why don't you try changing something?
Yeah, sleep more.
You know what I mean? And just see whether you feel better, because it's the time horizon. I think it's the lifespan versus health span, which is what we kind of, I think, something that's really important. I'm not too worried about living till like I'm 100. What I want to do is I want to get into older age but be really healthy. I want to, I see, I have my favorite patient is a 95-year-old man. When he was 92, I think he would have been 92 in COVID, and he came in and said, people are delivering medications, and he said, I want to deliver medications to the vulnerable on my bike.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is what I want to be like.
Yeah.
Because his mindset is just like, he goes out on he sits on his turbo trainer in his flat, and I'm like, I want to be that guy. Yeah. Like, I love that. His attitude, he's healthy, he's, and he's,
guy.
Yeah, and when you listen to him about what he's done, he's made adaptations. I think this is where we want to take Naru on, is basically allowing people to just find journeys using a kind of a global brand for sort of global health, and people can pick and choose and find things within that, what they help. And for us, we always feel like fasting is at the kind of foundation for us. It might not be for everyone, but as a baseline, just that principle of not eating 3 hours before you go to bed, not eating 2 hours after you wake up.
Yeah.
I think there's just sort of certain core things, use them and just introduce them. And I think just stick with them as we've said.
That thing you said about not eating 3 hours before going to bed is huge.
Yeah.
Like, I know you'll know the scientific reasons behind it, but if you're listening to this, try it. Try not eating before you go to bed for 3 hours for like 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks. You've got enough in you to do 3 weeks, no matter how disciplined or indisciplined you are. Try that. And then recognize how you feel the one time that you eat just before you go to bed, and you will feel tired the next. I do, because I'm quite good in terms of like I eat when the kids eat, and then I won't eat again.
Yeah.
But then I'll go through it. Like sometimes I get home, or there was 2 times I got home and I was like 10 o'clock at night. It'd been a long day, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to eat this, that, next day. I was quite full. Went to bed. Honestly, I was so tired the next day, and it could have been just because it's changed routine. But I was like, I know that it's because I'm eating too close to going to bedtime, because that's legitimately some things that I've seen. There's you guys say it, but there's loads of different angles that people come on from. It's like you need to have your routines going, which is your structures. But yeah, I think what you guys are doing is great.
Thanks, man. No, I really appreciate
because it is bringing what it is like if you just threw fasting out, it can be quite dangerous. Like some people just do it wrong. I know I did it when I first started, and it's when people understand the effectiveness and they understand it on just a slightly deeper level, it gives you power.
Yeah.
Because then people know the intent behind fasting rather than just I just want to lose weight. Yeah. But it's actually like I even put on one of those, like there's a company called Super Sapiens, and I had one of those on, and honestly it was fascinating because you see the glucose levels and what they do when you break your fast versus what you're doing in your fast and then you start to see the scientific side behind fasting, and it's not just mumbo jumbo. It's like everything you guys are saying and the information out there reflects to what your body's actually doing. It's not like when you take progesterone or something like you go, oh, that's what it's supposed to do, but I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Whereas like fasting is the one place that I've been able to come to and go, what they say I will feel, I feel. So therefore I don't need to look at 15 different scientific studies. And even then, like I heard on the way here, Recapture Rapture, the story is very, very good. I want to use it more. Is when it comes to science and the studies, we put aside logic sometimes. Right? Whereas fasting allows me to go, that's what the study says, that's what I feel. It's the same, great. Or, that's a bit different to how I feel. I'm going to go with how I feel because there's something that's behind that. And they go, there's a biologist, and it's a good biology joke, apparently. It's the first time I've ever heard it. He said there's a frog on a table, and he says to the frog, jump. So the frog jumps, and he jumps 10 inches. And then he cuts one of the legs off the frog, and then the frog, he says, jump. So the frog jumps, and he cuts the other leg off. So it's now 7.5 inches. And then he cuts the other leg off. Then he jumps 5 inches, and he says, jump, and jumps 5 inches. Then he cuts the last leg off, and he says, jump. And the frog can't move. And he gets his book, and he's like, marvelous. You'll never, like, frog was really good at jumping. And then I've discovered something really, really insane. He says, when a frog doesn't have any legs, they go deaf. And I had to rewind it because I want to hear the story. I was like, it's very good because we all have biases, the people doing the experiments. Like, I look at their methods and they won't realize that their conclusion is slightly different. So it's like fasting allows you to go, that's what the studies say, this is how I feel, don't underestimate how you feel, and just go with that according to what you've been given. So I really like that joke.
I like that. I know you've got to jump off, so I think that's a really good place to end. It's good. I think it's good though, because I think what you were saying before though about learning how it works for your body, I think we struggle with saying, if you do this, you'll feel like this, and it's expectation and then outcome, and you expect that there's always, if you start fasting and then you feel great or actually don't feel great, people then stop doing it. And I think it's important to sort of understand that if you do anything, any change is hard. So change is hard at the start, but if you stick to a change and it's a positive change, if you're going to start eating more donuts at night, it's not a positive change. But if you start, like you said, doing something that's consistent, you can only then understand, but I can't tell you what works for you. But what you can do is what we're talking about. This is why we're talking about the elements, it's like having the elements are like the golden BBs, rather than having one golden bullet, say, for fasting, and just saying if you just do that. But it's not. You have to exercise in your fast. You've got to eat more protein. You've got to make sure that when you break your fast, you're eating the right things. You're going to sleep well. You're connecting with family and friends. You're grounding. You're doing all these different things because they stack on top, and they're small little things you do to make your overall health more important. And I think if you're in a situation where you are performing well, then don't change anything. But unless you change something, you'll never know.
I mean, just to add on, when we talk about a lot about the process, not the outcome, if you're starting fasting or if you're struggling with it, my process of fasting was never like perfect. Like when I first started, it was easy to be disciplined around games, everything, but you go through periods where I'd break a fast terribly and I would eat so much food. I was just so hungry, and then I would do that for a long period. I was like, I'm fasting, and therefore I can eat a lot. So I can still fast. I can eat I wouldn't necessarily look at what I was breaking the fast with, and that's okay. Like, it's still effective because what it's doing is it's making you aware of where you're at. And if you don't do it, you can just become very blind to it. It will eventually get to a point where you go, I'm going to take it to the next level, and this is circular thinking, not linear. I'm going to take it to the next level where I'm going to be really intentional about what I break my fast with. So then you add in your apple cider vinegars if you want to control your glucose drops, ups and downs, or you actually then will break it on something small and then go to something big later. Whereas when I first started, I was like, I'd just eat a meal straight away and then I'd just crash. And then you feel bad and then you go, but it's okay. So I think that's part of the process that also needs to be identified, because not everyone that starts fasting is a scientist or is already disciplined. Like, sometimes you want to start fasting because you're indisciplined, you've got no consistency, and the fasting becomes your non-negotiable. So when we understand scale in it, if your scale is 14 hours and you break it on a huge meal, it's not perfect, it's great, but you've still got the intention to do it, because in 3 months' time, as long as you keep trying to improve the way you do it and understanding why don't break it on a big meal, you will start to get the discipline that makes it beneficial. And that's where it's like, scale on my consistency model is like, it's your scale. It's not the scale or the only scale. It's like, what is working for you? What will work for you? What can you do? You have to understand. You're saying the person that knows you best is you. So if you can't do a 24-hour fast straight up, don't do one. Do a 16-hour one and recognize how you feel and work up to it. If the end goal of what Naru, I say Naru.
Yeah, it's because
I'm South African. Is to have all these little golden BBs. Take one and start with that one. Don't try and start with all the elements, because it's going to be too much. It's like, unless you are training for a marathon or triathlon and you're paid to focus fully on only this, it's going to be something that you're going to have to build up, and but you will be able to. That's just, I promise you that you'll be able to build up to it. But whatever stage you're at the journey is like, just be kind to yourself and just keep going on it. Just be consistent with it and use whatever you're getting fed as it's either the perfect picture of where you want to be, or it's just going to help you just move that process just a little bit further. But the outcome is beneficial. I'll stand by it, and you guys also stand by it. And I think a lot of the medical side of the world does too around fasting.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, I've sort of 8 years into doing it, and I cannot sort of state the benefits I've had from it.
Yeah.
And I just, when I sort of, and it's funny because a lot of people that I've introduced it to, sort of for friends in the army and stuff, they would always be, this is complete BS. And then they do it and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And you're like, yeah, because you're carrying 50,000 calories on you all day, every day.
Yeah.
Maybe actually we kind of just need to remind ourselves that if we've got, 78 cheeseburgers worth of calories on us, actually, is it the fact that our body's inability to access that fuel part of the problem? Because energy is the currency. Energy is the currency of our body.
Yeah.
So if you feel tired, you eat. What happens when you feel down? You drink coffee. You've got people have stimulants and give them an up. All these different things. But actually, if you kind of go, energy should be pretty consistent, and it's the fact that if our body's just been taught out of accessing it. Then when you do access it and you kind of go, oh my God, like you said, the CGM, I did a podcast on it, which is going to come out yesterday. When you look at what's going on in your body, and you realise how much your hunger is habitualised, you kind of go, oh, it's 11 o'clock, I should break my fast. Or, oh, look, it's dinner time, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
When you look at it and you go, oh my God, my blood glucose is flat. And very seldom do you get this dip in your blood glucose levels, which you would think would correlate with you needing food. But it hardly ever does.
Yeah.
And
it is your biology driving the mentality, isn't it? Interesting.
Because it's stupid to think that your body's going to go, oh, you're hungry now, we're not going to do anything about it. If you've got all this food on you, it's going to go, right, well, if you haven't got food, as you would have done thousands of years ago, we're going to give you some food that we've got stored and make you more resilient, ketones, make you more driven. Because if you didn't and you sat on the sofa, you'd just die.
Yeah.
If you sat on the floor and you're out in the wild, you don't see anyone that's, my dog in the morning comes up to me and she's bouncing in the morning for food, because that's her driver. That's what you need to survive.
Yeah.
So
we forget how resilient we are.
Yeah.
Like we've survived so much.
Yeah.
And yet we sat in a world that tells us, oh, you take this, you're not good enough. It's just like, come on, you've got this. Like we've got this as people. And like the analogy I always used to use when I first started explaining fasting to people was, you've got someone with a shovel and you've got a stove in your belly or in your system. And the same way that you think like people in ships, how they used to make the ships run, is there's charcoal, and he'd be shoveling charcoal in there. But if you're constantly giving charcoal, they're not going to be able to shovel it quick enough, so it's going to be stored there. So he's going to store more charcoal. But if you're putting more charcoal in, they're going to stand at the top of charcoal and they're not going to be able to put it in properly. And that's where like the analogy of like it's blocked or inflamed is because he can't put efficiently. So when you fast, it's like, right, we're not putting any more charcoal in. They can then start to put everything else in, and then the room gets cleared and they're like, oh, I feel so much better now, I can have a bit of a break. But if you're constantly giving charcoal, that person with a shovel is like non-stop. So no wonder you get tired. And that whole like 6 meals a day, all that that's just someone shoveling.
But you wouldn't go to a full fridge and go, right, rather than eating out the fridge, which is like your body, you go, well, I'm going to do another weekly shot.
Yeah.
And that's like going to the prep and getting another sandwich, because you're like,
and you just start piling your
well, that's stupid, because then you get all this stuff and it starts to fill your cupboards up where normal things would go.
Yeah.
It starts to break down and rot and all these types of things, and you kind of go, so it's just crazy. But look, man, I really appreciate you got to shoot off. So thank you so much for the podcast today. What an experience, and hopefully we'll get you on again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me.